Okay. Okay, well, please welcome Julianne. I've had the pleasure of previewing a little bit of this presentation, so I know it will be really interesting for you to love it. So, yes, welcome. Yay! Okay. Welcome to Angel Accounting and Business Services. My name is Julianne Angel and I'm the CEO. With over 30 years of successful operation, Angel Accounting and Business Services is a proactive and innovating accounting and business advisory firm based in Daisy Hill, Queensland, with offices located all over Australia. The firm has established a reputation for being at the forefront of coaching and assisting like-minded, progressive business owners in their pursuit of growth, wealth creation and business success. Our comprehensive approach includes benchmarking, forecasting, information analysis and management advice. The team at AABS is dedicated to driving business forward and inspiring others to great heights. Most team members have been recruited as trainees and are trained intensively on the skills required to be a leader in the field. Our areas of speciality include business basics, marketing, human resources, accountancy and finance, operations, ethics, social responsibility and strategic management. This is how I introduced my terms. Within this space, they have been working up the corporate ladder and making their way through our business. So if you've had the pleasure of being in Wesley 7 before I got relocated to Bradley, or 2 or 4, you would have noticed up on the wall there are these two posters standing side by side. So the students all had their little ID badges created in the first lesson, and they started at the trainee level and they've been slowly working their way up, trying to knock me off as CEO. So far the closest I've got is a full-time supervisor. So I'm safe at the moment, but we are still working there. So with the exception of business basics, they were told that they could work in any order, and we actually made a decision a bit later in the term to split the exam in 2 instead of having one that went for 90 minutes. We split it into a 60-minute and a 30-minute exam. So they got told that the strategic management had to be left till after exam 1, just to give you an idea. Basically, as a trainee, how have they gone about doing this? They have been working through the business. They start at the ground floor because that was the only one they had to start with, and work their way through the departments. They select a task that they want to complete, which is located through the Lincoln sector, and I'll walk you through that space in a minute. They've read the instructions, they record their findings in their handbook, they complete the task, and then they submit it to me for feedback and to get the points that are awarded with each of the tasks, in the hope that they work their way up. I have had 3 of my girls tell me that even if it means it takes them to the end of the year, they're going to keep coming back to the game even once we've finished the actual work for assessment, because they're desperate to try and get to that 9,500 points. So I'll be interested to see if that actually does happen past the exam next week, but we'll see what happens. Okay, so our business, if it's going to let me move, is basically a page in SharePoint that the kids click through. So when they go into one of the levels of the business, they come across the floor, and this is just the business layout. The 1-star questions were compulsory. Had to, must do, this is the basic knowledge part of the content. The 2-star ones looked at application of the knowledge, analysis, your higher order thinking type of exercises, and your 3-star ones were case studies, where they had to apply what they knew to a business case study. There were some 3-star ones that we made compulsory, and part of that was to do with the fact that one half of their first exam was a case study. So getting them used to how do you actually answer a case study. So when you look at some of these tasks, you come in and there's the business memo telling you what your task is for the day. And then 50 points, and 3 stars were worth 100 points in working their way through. So some of them are structured like this. You're required to attend a meeting with the CEO. Please ensure you organise a time, getting them used to their own time management as well. Must have 5 employees, because I really didn't want to give this meeting 28 times. So they had to organise groups of 5 at least. They actually got pretty smart. They worked out that if they could manage to get groups of 10 of them together, they could actually see the presentation more than once, because I'd given them a maximum number for the class that I would do. So they started working on that one. They had to take notes, and in this particular one, the points were awarded on the notes that they took, and each dot point had to have less than 5 words per dot point to get the 20 points for this particular activity. So some of them are structured like that one. The doorway here was always linked back to the main page as well. So some of them were like that. Some of them looked, 7 was that one. Some looked a little bit like this, so they'd actually get the PowerPoint attached to the memo. And, you know, you don't need to be a genius to read through this PowerPoint. You just need to sort of go through it. So this particular task said, read through the PowerPoint and then give me in your own words an explanation. So some of the tasks were a little bit like that. Some of them were a little bit more in depth, so they needed, so this one, HR2, actually required 1. So 1 was the PowerPoint explaining the cycle, the human resource cycle, and then 2 required them to come through and actually work out what part of the cycle was I talking about, and then in your own words, tell me what it is that we're looking at and why is human resources important. I had one kid tell me that it was the human life cycle, and that human resources should have really meant human remains, because that's what happens when you finish. So it was kind of interesting to see their take on some of it. Moving into sort of the higher levels, and you're looking at the 2 stars, you know, in this instance, it's just as simple as taking a process that was in their textbook and getting them to put it in a different format. Actually take the information that we've had, you know, here's, you know, the production of a meat pie. What does that look like when you're looking at inventory management and you know, managing the processes of operations. Some of our case studies involve watching a video, so I'd show the video a couple of times during classes. And then when we got to the strategic management side, which is what we've been looking at lately, there was actually a pre-task. This was partly put in place because I was in Melbourne. It's really hard to teach a new concept when you're in a different state. So the first task actually had them to read a SWOT that was done of IKEA, that was actually published about IKEA, and then they answered a couple of questions. And then step 2, which was the lesson that we had last, I actually then went through a couple of times during the lesson. I took 20 minutes just to explain a SWOT in absolute entirety, because SWOT's a really easy concept to understand but really hard to actually implement. And to get their 20 points for this one, there was actually a 10-question Kahoot puzzle that they had to do at the end, where their score is the number of points that they've got. So the points have actually allocated depending on their answer, depending on how they operated. So not only could they earn points by doing activities, but they could also earn bonus points, badges, and achievements for a number of things. And I sort of broke this into 3 areas. One for the completeness of the number of quests that they've done. So they sort of got a little bit of a bonus for, the first one you do, yay, let's, jolt that up quickly. So you move from trainee to employee. The sort of second one was giving them a bonus because they'd actually met one of those milestones in the corporate ladder. And the third one was at the end of every week, the top 10 students got a bonus for being the top of the rankings for that particular topic. Some of the kids worked out really quickly that they should start at the back and work forwards because then they got the bonus points a little bit more often compared to those that started business basics and decided just to work up the building in a logical manner. Collecting all of the evidence and all of the things that go with it, I set up a class OneNote that all the students have access to, so you can sort of see every child. Bold means there's something there waiting for me to look at, which was absolutely blank yesterday, so they've realised they've got a class tomorrow, which is a good thing. So you can see here, every student has their own section. There's a collaboration space, so whenever they were working in a group, they'd set up a tab, depending on what it was, and you'd see the group's ideas form on the page. The content library space was where I would put a blank copy of things that I didn't want the kids to actually edit, like things like the current rankings and where they're sitting. I don't want the kids the ability to change their point system, so that content library area was very much a case of they can't edit. It also meant that they could see sort of like criteria, so employee of the week, for instance, was just the darts rubric, so that they could see that the person who got employee of the week, it was because they met excellent in all of those things for that particular week. The KPIs are just the progress indicators, so I kept a blank copy in there, but each of the students would, at the beginning and end of each lesson, actually check in to see where they were up to with that particular progress indicator. And you can see that they sort of take command of what is happening. They all had a managerial planning page that allowed them to tell me what they were doing when they were working on it, a space for them to sort of drop in the documents that they had been working on, and I could upload my remarks and responses back. Of course, the never-ending spreadsheet of where they're up to and the badges they've collected so that they could see what was going on. Their handbook was completely their space to sort of put in their studying and what they need to know. I mean, Charlie was my favourite because I actually, on the evening that she was doing her study, happened to be in there doing some marking, and I could literally watch her and her study notes happen across the screen, which she found a little bit spooky because I kept correcting things that she'd made, like incorrect assumptions she'd made, so that she was on the right track at the same time. But you can see there, they took control of what it was that they needed to know and whether they had met that need. Some obviously work in that space a lot better than others. Some got to the point where I'd get emails because they'd forgotten how to connect. So it wasn't without its problems, so to speak. But it did, meant that I could keep track of it from afar as well. Like, unfortunately, this term I've had a lot of instances where I'm out of the classroom. What does my typical lesson look like? This is, I know I had Courtney ask me what it looked like because, you got kids in every direction, what they're doing. So each lesson always started with sort of like messages, updates, reminders. They all would then do a OneNote update, which basically meant everywhere I'd put a sad face, they needed to make sure that they had put information in because they'd forgotten to put it in. A KPI check-in for the start of the lesson. Go to the managerial page, update it. They worked through the task that they were up to. I would check in with some students. I'd make a note of the kids that I wanted to follow up on. Usually during that lesson, I had 3 kids that without fail I was seeing them every lesson. There was no way they were going anywhere till I'd spoken to them. Often kids would check in themselves, walk through a couple of tasks. If I found there was a group falling behind, I would then start walking them through the task with them, because usually it was that stumping point of, I really don't understand, but I don't want to ask. So I would then move the kids together that hadn't done a task and work through it with them. A KPI check-in, their homework allocation at the end of the lesson. And then I kept track of this in my own Excel spreadsheet that literally was just a yes-no system. And that yes-no system, if it was a yes with a red, it meant that I had seen they'd handed it in, but I hadn't actually given them feedback yet. So just walking through that so that I could keep track of where they were up to and what they needed to do as well. So I'm halfway through marking the first exam, and I'm pretty impressed with the results from that, considering, you know, the term that we've had. So hopefully tonight I finish the other half and I'll be even happier.
You can just see the amount of work that has gone into that to pull it all together. But it's really engaging as well. They're all achieving and they are challenged also. So can I please thank everyone who has presented this afternoon. Well done, everyone. Thank you so much. And there'll be another one in term 4. Please encourage people to come and get the marking.